Sometimes the reason you can't make yourself do something isn't because that you've lost your discipline. It's because you've been forcing yourself past your emotional capacity for so long that eventually even one more demand starts to feel like it's too much. And when that happens, pushing yourself harder might actually be the last thing that you need. Maybe lately you've noticed yourself procrastinating on things that you normally do care about. Maybe your phone rings and instead of wanting to answer it, you just stare at it. Maybe somebody asks you for something incredibly small and internally you're thinking, please, I don't want anybody to be asking me for anything else today. Or maybe you're doing everything that you're supposed to do. You're going to work, you're answering people, you're handling your responsibilities, you're showing up in your relationships. But emotionally inside, you feel like your battery has been sitting at 3% for weeks. And I actually had experienced some of that in myself recently. So if you've been following this podcast, you've probably noticed that I haven't uploaded a new episode in a few months. And I didn't originally intend to take 2 to 3 months off. There wasn't some dramatic announcement where I said, I'm disappearing for the summer. Goodbye, everybody. It was much quieter than that. And I kept thinking that I would come back to it. Maybe next week. Then another week passed. And another. And eventually I realized that I was constantly telling myself that I should be doing something wasn't actually helping me become ready to do it. And it was just turning something that I cared about into just another demand. And that made me start thinking about something we talk about all the time on this podcast. Is what happens when your nervous system reaches its full limit, as I like to say. Because sometimes stepping back isn't giving up. Sometimes it's just information. One of the biggest signs that you may need an emotional reset is when your mind keeps saying go while the rest of you keeps saying no. And if we were to give a name of this sign, which is sign number 1, is your body starts resisting what your mind keeps demanding. And that resistance can show up in surprisingly ordinary ways, believe it or not. You sit down to complete something and suddenly you want to do literally anything else. You're exhausted even though you don't think that you've done enough or to justify being exhausted. You become more irritable. You have trouble concentrating. Little inconveniences start feeling enormous. And then we make it worse by judging ourselves for it. Why am I being so lazy? Why can't I just get this done? Everybody seems to handle their life and we start to be really hard on ourselves, right? But instead of immediately asking yourself, how do I make myself perform better? I want you to try asking yourself instead, what has my nervous system been carrying? Because emotional exhaustion isn't only created by a packed calendar. Sometimes the calendar looks completely manageable, but mentally, you've been carrying uncertainty, conflict, relationship anxiety, financial stress, family responsibilities, decisions you haven't even made yet, conversations you keep replaying, things you're waiting to find out. And your brain doesn't necessarily file those things away neatly when you decide you're done thinking about them. Sometimes they're just still running in the background, like having 20 browser tabs open and wondering why your computer sounds like it's preparing for takeoff. Your nervous system is still doing the work. Sign number 2, everything starts to feel urgent. And this is where emotional exhaustion can become especially intense for people with anxious attachment patterns like I used to have, right? So when your nervous system is activated, uncertainty can feel like you're having an emergency, right? Someone hasn't texted you back. You need to know why at that very moment, usually. Their tone sounded different. You need to figure out what changed. Something feels off in your relationship. You need reassurance right now. And suddenly your brain becomes a detective working an unpaid overnight shift. You're rereading messages, replaying conversations, checking whether they're online, thinking about what you should say, thinking about what you shouldn't say, wondering if you said too much, wondering if you didn't say enough. And underneath all of that activity is usually one very uncomfortable feeling, which is, I don't feel safe not knowing. And let me tell you guys, I've been here. I was actually at this point like a couple weeks ago. However, this is the part I want you to pay attention to, because sometimes what looks like a relationship problem is actually a nervous system desperately trying to escape that uncertainty. You want to get out of it, right? Trust me, I know how it is, how uncomfortable uncertainty is, right? And when we're emotionally exhausted, our tolerance for uncertainty becomes even smaller. And that's why one of the most important parts of an emotional reset is learning that not everything uncomfortable requires immediate action. You can be uncomfortable without fixing something tonight. You can miss somebody without contacting them tonight. You can wonder what someone is thinking without finding out tonight. And you can have an unanswered question and allow it to remain unanswered for a little bit. That isn't passivity. That's actually emotional regulation. Sign number 3, you lose access to yourself. Now, this one can actually be harder to notice because sometimes we spend so much time monitoring everything outside of ourselves that we gradually stop checking in on what's happening inside of us. What are they feeling? Are they pulling away? Are they mad? Do they still want me? What should I say that doesn't become a problem? And notice how much attention is pointed outward. Now imagine redirecting even some of that attention back towards yourself. How are you feeling right now? What do you need? And these are questions I even ask myself to regulate myself as well. Do I actually want to have this conversation right now? Am I responding because I genuinely want connection, or am I trying to make my anxiety disappear? Those are very different things. And sometimes an emotional reset begins with something incredibly simple, which is coming back into your own life. Not the life happening inside someone else's text messages, not the hypothetical future you're trying to predict, your actual life, the room that you're sitting in, the body you're living in, the people you love, the things that you enjoy, the plans you have that exist completely independent of whether someone chooses you. And that's where we start getting access to ourselves again. So what does emotional reset actually look like, you may be wondering? An emotional reset doesn't mean disappearing from your life, and it doesn't mean spending 3 days in bed waiting to magically feel different. It actually means intentionally reducing some of that emotional noise long enough to hear yourself again. So I want you to start with your body. And before you analyze what something means, I want you to notice what's physically happening. Are your shoulders tense? Are you holding your breath? Is your jaw clenched? Do you feel restless, heavy, exhausted? Your body can sometimes tell you what you're overwhelmed with before your thoughts are willing to admit it. And then I want you to ask yourself, what actually requires my attention today? Not this week, not eventually, but today. Because when everything feels important, your nervous system treats everything as a threat. Sometimes regulation looks like giving yourself permission to say, that can wait. I don't have to solve that right now. I don't know yet. I'll decide later. And yes, sometimes I don't need to respond right now. Then deliberately reconnect with something that has absolutely nothing to do with the thing consuming your thoughts. I want you to go outside, go cook something, watch something ridiculous, Work on something creative. Call somebody that you feel safe with. Go take a shower. Clean one corner of your room. Listen to music. Not because these things magically solve your problems. They remind your nervous system that my life is larger than this moment. But there is an important difference between resetting and withdrawing. And this distinction matters a lot when we're talking about attachment. Taking space can be healthy. Avoiding emotional intimacy is something different. Imagine you're overwhelmed during a difficult conversation with your partner. A regulated pause might sound something like, I'm getting overwhelmed and I don't know what to say. If I want to say something, I don't mean. Can we take a break and talk about this tomorrow? There's communication, there's a boundary, and there is a path back to connection. Now compare that with shutting down, disappearing, refusing to communicate, leaving someone wondering whether a relationship even exists anymore, and then returning whenever the discomfort has passed. Those behaviors can look similar from the outside because both involve distance, but psychologically they're very different. Healthy space protects connection. Chronic avoidance escapes it. And this applies to ourselves too. An emotional reset shouldn't become another way of avoiding everything difficult indefinitely. Eventually we return. We have the conversations. We make the decision. We finish the project. We reopen the laptop, which is actually what I'm actually doing right now. Taking these last couple of months away from this podcast actually gave me space to realize that sometimes returning doesn't mean picking up exactly where you left off. Sometimes you come back differently, and maybe that's something you need permission to do too. You don't have to become the version of yourself who could tolerate everything you used to tolerate, and you don't have to maintain a pace that's exhausting you simply because you were once capable of maintaining it. And you definitely don't have to earn rest by completely falling apart first. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is notice the warning signs while they're still whispers. Because the goal of emotional regulation isn't to become overwhelmed. It's learning how to recognize yourself before overwhelm starts making your decisions for you. So if you've been feeling emotionally exhausted lately, I want you to ask yourself one question. What am I carrying right now that I've been pretending isn't heavy? Don't immediately fix it. Don't judge the answer. I just want you to notice it. Because sometimes awareness itself is the first moment your nervous system finally gets to stop shouting. And if you've been here waiting for another episode, I'm actually glad you're still here, because we have plenty to talk about. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, you guys. I will keep you guys posted on what my new schedule is as far as episodes go. And other than that, I'll speak to you guys in the next podcast episode.